Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Man's Model Moments Midweek Model Meet. This week, I've got a couple of guests on. They've both been on before. I don't think ever at the same time. I could be wrong. You know, I've had a birthday, so I'm a year older, so maybe it never gets easier. And I think also John Alec should be popping in later on. Obviously, located in the States, it's a little bit later for him. A little bit earlier for him when it's later for us. I know how time works. So let's get them on. So first of all, Jamie, good to see you. I think you're muted.
There we go. How's that?
There we go. Now we can hear you.
Yeah, I was just making the tea, so I muted the mic. Got to turn it back on.
And also, Gary, welcome.
Let's know, Jamie. How you going? You all right, guys?
Yeah,
Not
great.
too bad.
Thanks.
Not too bad.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Much better than last week.
Yes, you were a little bit under the weather,
Yeah.
I believe.
I was, yeah. Yeah, felt a bit rubbish, but fighting fit now.
Are you still in the UK, Jamie?
No, I'm back in Saudi Arabia.
Say,
It's 10 o'clock.
That looked like a very familiar background. So,
yeah, this is the apartment, not the man cave, unfortunately.
Yes. So this week's topic was actually brought up by a comment on one of my videos. I forget which one now. It was. I've clicked away from it, so I can't. And the way YouTube works, it doesn't let me see that. But anyway, it was a comment that was talking about the speed of projects, and they mentioned that they prefer a single long-term project, and we're talking 2.5 years, rather than lots of small things. Because one, they didn't have space to store things, and they like to be engaged on something for a long time, which was a little surprising from my side. And I thought, well, actually, that's something that we don't really talk about very much, is how long do we actually spend on a modeling project? Because obviously I've done the crazy things like 1-hour challenges, which are not really to be recommended. 1 hour is not long enough for any modeling project, really. But that's quite a range. From 1 hour to sort of 2.5, 3 years is quite a big scope. So I thought it'd be useful, rather than me just talking about what I do, and that wouldn't be a very interesting video, but to bring it up tonight and talk about what is an ideal project length. You know, and obviously, like with most things, I think we could probably cut 2 hours short and say it depends. That's not a very interesting answer.
Nah.
So,
and good night. Thank you for joining us.
Yes. So
Don't forget to like.
Yes, we've been on for 8.5 minutes, including the 5-minute intro. So we've answered that. So thanks, everybody. See you next time.
Yeah.
So Gary, what about you? What do you think is I mean, for you, let's talk about what we do ourselves, and then talk about in general what we think about. So, what's kind of average length of one of your projects?
Well, it's a little bit different for me in that YouTube is my entire income. So I have to do a lot of videos. Ideally, I'd do 1 kit a week in an ideal world. Unfortunately, when I first started doing it, then a lot of the kits I could do in 1 week and do 1 or 2 other videos in the meantime. Now I've sort of gone further and further. I've run out of the easier kits to make out of the airfix range, for example. You know, I'm taking on bigger and bigger projects, and they take 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 weeks. And so I tend to have to try and get lots of different projects running at once. I've probably got 4, maybe 5 builds on at the moment. And it's always complicated by I'm not complaining about this incidentally. It's always complicated by people sending stuff to you, and you think, oh, I really ought to put that in the schedule quite early, or stuff that's of general interest, you know, a new release that's particularly everyone's got a buzz about. You think, I really ought to do that soon, and that messes up your schedule. So, you know, you end up sometimes spending 3 or 4 months on a build in the background and do maybe 2 videos about it. Whereas in the meantime, I might get a kit in, and I say, no, I've got to do that this week, and it has to be done in a day or two because there's other videos that need to be done. So mine is very much a very, very strange and unrepresentative world in that I spend like 10, 12 hours a day building stuff and making videos about it. So I mean, if I had my choice, I would spend. And I could be doing it all day, like I'd retired and had loads of money and didn't have to worry about things like this. I'd probably spend 2 or 3 weeks per kit if I could.
Yeah. Okay. Jamie, what about you?
Well, I only do one model at a time because I find if I do multiple different kits, I'll just lose interest in some of them. So I just do one at a time, and then obviously it depends on the model. The only exception to that is when I might do, say, a dual combo, something like that from Edward, and I'll do 2 side by side, which I think it's more efficient and it speeds up the builds because obviously you've already got the paint in the airbrush, so you can do 2 cockpits at the same time, that kind of thing. And actually, I'm about to start that. I'm going to do 3 70-second 109s from Edward shortly. So yeah, it just depends on the project. I've got, I suppose the quickest I've ever done really is I challenged myself, can I make an Edward weekend kit in over a weekend? And I did that because I was getting fed up with people moaning that they couldn't build it in a weekend, but it said weekend on the box, you know, completely missing the point of why it's called weekend. And it annoyed me so much, I thought, right, I'm going to bloody well do it. And I did. Now, the advantage I have working abroad with the family back in the UK is my free time is my free time. And it's up to me how much I spend at the bench. You know, most people have got families at home and they've got to fit their modeling around the family. I suppose for some people, family gets in the way of modeling. But yeah, and it just depends on the project. So these 109s I'm about to do, I'll smash out these 3 70-second 109s in fairly short order, I'd imagine. But then I've got a kinetic Sea Harrier, and I'm doing the laminar flow designs 32nd scale Spitfire Mark 14 conversion with the Tamiya kit. So I'm going from sort of one end, not quite to the other, because that's probably a 1 to 200th Bismarck with all the photo etch and whatever, you know, that would take me 2 years to do, you know, to give it justice. But for me, in my genre, I'm going from the quickest ones probably to the most difficult / complicated / long projects, literally back to back. And I've no idea how long they're going to take me. They'll be done when they're done. Now I'm on a schedule at work at the moment where I'm doing 4 days on, but they're 12-hour days. So it's literally eat, sleep, work, back in, and then I've got 3 days off. 1 day normally recovering, and then 2 days I can smash to the bench. But very shortly we're going back to normal 5 days. So I'll be able to do sort of evening modeling time and get back to normal on that, which I think is probably going to speed me up. I think. But it's been so long since we were back to normal. I'll have to measure.
What is normal?
Exactly. You know, the new normal, to coin a phrase, but we're going back to the old normal shortly. So yeah, depends on the project, I guess, and how much time I can give to the bench. And then when I go home, I'm not doing any modeling. So with my YouTube hat on, what I try and do is I'll try and get some content in the bank, so I can release that over. So I did the Tamiya F14, which probably took me a month to get that done. And I sat on that for quite a few months, and then I released that over Ramadan, which is 5 weeks. And that sort of bridged the gap quite nicely.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. I mean, I think I probably sit between you both, in that, I will do the odd stuff, usually unboxings rather than actual projects, to the kind of YouTube slave algorithm kind of thing. I try and avoid it where I can, because it's one aspect of YouTube that I really dislike. But obviously we're in slightly privileged positions, variously depending on your view of things. But I quite often have kits that I know people won't be able to get early, or they're quite expensive or whatever. So you want to be able to cover that in some way, which of course does. I still have to do a kind of video on my YouTube process, but a simple unboxing for me, people say, well, it doesn't take long to do that. Well, it might not if you're just doing it on your phone and just ad-libbing it. It's not the way I do my unboxings. So an unboxing video will take me at least 8 hours of the actual footage. Probably doesn't take long. The editing it together, script writing. So once I've edited it, I'll actually write a script going through the video process. Then I got to record that. I've got to do my audio engineering on it, and then put it all together, publish it, write all the crap that goes along with YouTube, which, as you both know, takes a while. So it's about 8 hours all in to do that simple unboxing, and that's 8 hours I'm not doing stuff on the bench. So I do try and avoid it, but I mean, this Burger Panther with the Panzer IV turret, I built that really quickly, up to the point of painting it. I painted it pretty quickly. I still haven't got the damn tracks on, because the individual link tracks. So that has held up that from being a kind of 3-day project to being 2 or 3 weeks. Because once I've done the tracks, obviously then I have to do all the weathering, which I haven't even started. So on a standard build, for me, again, like you, Jamie, like you, Gary, I tend to have several projects on the go at once. But yeah, it's so. I mean, I've got a Blenheim which has been going on for probably over a year, because it got to a certain stage. Other stuff, like you said, Gary, came in that needed doing. The Blenheim was a kit I inherited from my dad when he died. So I approached it, but it's not new. There's not any particularly new angle I have on it. So it got to a stage, just because I was doing it because I wanted to. And then actually doing the YouTube channel, it's like, well, like you say, Gary, it gets shoved down in the priority order. And it kept getting shoved down. So it's not actually an active project at the moment. It wouldn't take much to finish it, but it's just, you need a reason to.
Yeah.
I've got the Blenheim. So that's kind of off. I've got the Marauder, which I could finish. Now, so far, it's only taken me, the actual modeling time, it's 26 hours, because I did that stupid 24-hour challenge build on it, which I don't recommend anybody does. And I spent a couple more hours on it. So actually, you could do it in a weekend if that's all you did. But again, I wouldn't recommend it. It's not giving the best of the kit. And it's not really, I think, how you want to. It's not what our hobby is about, right? Because our hobby is about enjoyment. A lot of it's about relaxation. Now, if you get that just from throwing the plastic together and quickly blasting it, then yeah, you could probably do that kit in a few days. But I imagine people will want to take a little bit more time. For me, I'd want to take a little bit more time. But like you, Jamie, if I don't do something for a while, then not necessarily gets lost interest, but other things become more of a priority. And then you kind of lose your mental thread on where you are with it, kind of what you wanted to do. So I don't like to spend too long on a project. I would say probably with all the concurrent things, it takes me a couple of months to do an average project, from start to finish, and then plus whatever YouTube time, which could be, as you say, Jimmy, could be months afterwards that you're actually publishing the video. Some of my videos are out of sync, and my list of Patreons are completely out of date when they actually go out. But it was current at the time that it did it, so I don't think that's a particular problem. But yeah, it really does depend, I think, what you actually want to get out of modeling. And as you both said, what are the other pressures on you there? As always, folks, if you have a question or a comment, please type it in capital letters so I can actually pick it out and still listen to Gary and Jamie when they're talking. A bit of few, and I see, welcome everybody. I see a lot of regulars. I haven't gone through and named everybody because I was a little bit late sort of starting today. But just scrolling down, I think the first one, and apologies if it isn't, and if I've missed anybody, please do pop your comment in again. But Julian, welcome as always. One issue is progress. If you're happy with slow, then long-term projects is okay, but if you want rapid process, then shorter projects. I think that's a fair point, right? So that kind of speaks to what you were talking about, Jamie. I mean, for me, if I actually don't get progress on something, if I feel like I'm butting my head against the wall, I tend to lose enthusiasm for that. That initial momentum starts to die. And if I don't have a pressing reason, let's say, like it was a kit that was sent by a channel member or, a company or something else like that, a D-Day build, for instance, so there's a specific date, then it kind of goes on. For me, like the Blenheim, it kind of gets pushed off to the side, Do you guys suffer from the progress piece, or is it?
I don't think I do, because I just choose what I want to build, and if I'm going to do a review for a magazine or something like that, which I haven't done for years and years now, if an editor offered me up a project and I didn't particularly fancy it, I'd just say no. And I only do what I want to do at the time. So I'm under no pressure whatsoever. I used to do commissions back in the day, and I gave it up because it was just a pain in the arse. And that is a right mojo sucker. When you're building something you don't particularly want to do, you're doing it for a bit of pocket money, or it goes towards your annual centre parks or whatever. So you kind of feel obliged. And then I just found that the client's just high maintenance, and it just sucks all the joy out of it. So I just gave it up. And I do build for a friend of mine now, but only occasionally, and I'll only agree to do it if I want to do it. And I've only done a couple so far. And actually the Sea Harry is for him, and I've always wanted to build that kinetic Sea Harry, even though I know what I'm letting myself in for. I'm up for the challenge, and I'm excited to see how it's going to turn out. And that just keeps the mojo going, and I've always got the picture in my head of what I want it to look like at the end. I don't always hit that. But that's another driver that keeps the mojo going. So I've always got that kind of enthusiastic crest of the wave I'm riding. Normally, it's I've got no shelf of doom. It's very rare that I just fall out of love with a project. Because, like I say, I'm always really enthusiastic about it before I start.
Commissions are a strange one. I've done two recently, which are very, very different. one of them was somebody I've already done a commission for, again through the shop, and I kind of like commissions, and have the same. I have a love-hate relationship with them, I guess is the best way to say it, because it allows you to build kits sometimes that you wouldn't normally have ever approached. And again, I don't just take on commissions. I have some discernment. I think you have to. If you just took on everything, it would become an absolute chore, I think.
Yeah.
But it gives you. So I did 2 recently. One was a 1/48 scale B-17 for D-Day. It was actually one that it's called Old Faithful. Actually crashed on its return from a bombing raid in 1944 at just near the shop. Actually, about 300-400 yards up from the road into a farm. Killed all the crew. After flak damaged a wing. They tried to make it home, didn't make it. Now that was it was a labor of not love. I'm trying to think of the right word. Respect, I guess. Because I had a certain date. But it was the old Revell monogram 1/48 B-17. So it's which was a great kit of its time. Not a great kit now. So I hated building the kit, and trying to get it again. And I charged a nominal fee because it was for the local museum, right? If I'd actually charged what I wanted to, then it would have been less painful, I think. What I should have done. The other one is a Lotus 49 from Tamiya. Which is again a great kit for its time, not so much now, but that is a kit that I've quite enjoyed doing because it's very not in my normal work box. I think it's 1/12. Yeah, it is 1/12 scale. 1/12 scale Formula One car from the 60s. It looks pretty cool. Now it's done. That was a bitch of a kit to work with. Chromed parts, short shots on chromed parts, which you don't really notice until you're halfway through, on a kit that you can't really get replacements for, was challenging. But actually, I kind of feel like I learned quite a bit doing that kit, and I probably wouldn't have ever picked that up. Well, I'm certain, unless I was gifted it, I would have never picked that kit up and actually attempted it. So I've got very mixed feelings about commissions because I've actually enjoyed that Lotus in some ways, and I've learned a bit. And one of the things I do enjoy is, again, I've done a model for this client before. They did it as a birthday present for one of their friends who actually, it's the Seafire, the historic flight Seafire that went over to Yeoton. It was actually for the guy who flies it, and that's quite cool, that and getting the feedback as well that they really enjoyed it and they liked it and stuff. That's a nice feeling. You've spread some joy in the world. That's great. But yeah, otherwise it can be a bit of a slippery slope. So, and certainly you don't get paid the hours that you put in,
Absolutely,
because otherwise they would become very, very expensive. If I charge my consulting rate, for building models, I'd be paid thousands and thousands of pounds for a kit, and nobody's going to do that. So it'd be great if they did. I wish they did. It'd be fantastic.
Nice. I might take up commissions again if they did that.
Yeah.
What about you, Gary? What do you think about progress during a build? Does that influence your build time, or?
No, it's just how it's going, and just get a feel for how it's going and how excited I am to push on with it. And then sometimes it's like, I started this 3 weeks ago. I really, really ought to finish the cockpit now, and start getting some videos together of it. It's as I say, it's a lot of the time it sadly crosses over from hobby to job. And when it's job, I don't enjoy it as much as I would were it purely a hobby. So I've got a couple of projects that I tinker with in the background, which are just for me. I'm not filming them. I'm not doing anything at all. I'm just doing them. Every now and again, I just think, right, this afternoon, I'm just going to work on that. So I've got a really small diorama with a couple of 144th scale amphibious vehicles and current US Marine vehicles. And I just want to get them coming out of water. So I've got a beach. I'm going to get some acrylic to do the water and just practice doing that and make it look like they're coming out of the water. But they're not going to be step by step on the channel or anything like that. I'm just going to do them.
Yeah.
And the other projects is I've got a Hella 400 scale aircraft carrier to do, which was the ship that my dad spent a lot of his career on in the Fleet Air Arm. It's HMS Arromanche, which is a Colossus class ship, and he was on HMS Triumph, which is a Colossus class carrier. So there's loads of photo etch you can get. There's loads of 3D print resin, things like guns you can get. You can get the planes in 1/400th that it needs. And it's just something that I want to build over. You know, if it takes 2 or 3 years, I'll do it then, put it in a sea diorama and just something to remember my dad with. So it's a very personal project, and I'm not going to film that at all. I might say, hey, this is what I've been working on for the last 2 years, and there it is, and hurrah. But it's for me. I think I just need, every now and again, I need to get away from earning stuff and, as you say, chasing the algorithm on YouTube and worrying about whether or not this has been done, but it's released by airfix last week, and should I have done it by now, and all this sort of nonsense. And just step away and remember this is supposed to be fun and have some proper downtime and enjoyment of creating something without it being for work.
Yeah.
Just something. I just need to escape from it for a bit now and again. That's all.
It's funny, actually. I watched a video today by myself. That's not that I was like when I watched it. I watched one of my own videos, which is not something I do. It's not a narcissism thing. It came up because somebody had commented on my lightning video. I did the airfix 1/32 scale, 1/48 scale lightning, the F2A, quite a while back. But I did that as a tribute to my father. So it was his favorite aircraft. I think I've mentioned on this before, passed away in 2019. And he was the guy who got me into modeling. You know, I remember doing kits with my dad as far back as I can remember, you know, and you know, now you wouldn't have given a kid of my age at the time, you know, I remember it was those Stanley disposable blades, like the red handled, like fixed blade little modeling knives that you had, or craft knives. So I used those. One of my earliest memories is actually stabbing myself in the thumb with that. Because obviously it was quite a negative memory. But yeah, it was, I kind of not forgotten that I'd done the video, but it was surprising to me because I hadn't really just watched it. You know, I'd done the build, and one of the reasons I started the channel was actually to help me finish projects. I'm a terrible finisher because to me, and I think this was an airfix and chill. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it that week. About what are the biggest headaches in modeling, and people talk about photo etch and stuff. It's like, well, to me, those aren't headaches because those are all avoidable, right? You know, it's just like, if I don't want to do photo etch, I won't do photo etch. You know, I'll do other alternatives. For me, the thing that is unavoidable is the finishing stage of the model. To me, it's bringing it all together at the end. You know, because I might have done sub-assemblies of like the undercarriage and like the main aircraft, and I've got transparencies which I didn't put on because of masking and stuff. Like that Marauder doesn't have its nose on because that's mostly transparent. So I didn't want to put it on and have the MG which pokes out of the nose, which would undoubtedly have got broken had I put it on. So did that separately. So it's bringing all those elements together. You've kind of finished the kit. There's no more painting to be done, really. Exactly. Mine is a little more finished, This is how it is after 26 hours.
Excellent.
But yeah, no nose on it. Fabulous kit, by the way.
It's a stunning kit. Really is beautiful.
It is absolutely lovely. And I will build it again because 26 hours is not enough time to do it justice. So when Flackbait comes out, I'll definitely be doing Flackbait, because chat, if you don't know what Flackbait is, go and read up on Wikipedia. It was an amazing aircraft. I think they counted the number of bullet holes in it at one point, were over 1,000. Yeah, so you kind of get it from the name, right? It was a very survivable aircraft, B-26. But anyway, I just watched that video. It kind of, because it reminded me of my dad, and he and I, we had a fairly turbulent relationship. It wasn't like it was just, he was my icon and idol. He was very much a baby boomer, very much of that era, harsh disciplinarian, all those kinds of things. But it was just nice to actually watch it as almost like a video that somebody else had done, but with a personal connection. Strange, but yeah, I did actually. I was kind of pushed to finish that project because it had that personal connection, and because, well, I'm filming it and I'm going to put it on the channel. So again, there's a reason, and if it's for the channel, then I know that I have to, do it in a reasonable sort of time. I can't take 2 years on it, because, I might not have a YouTube channel in 2 years. It might have been cancelled, or, people are just bored or whatever, So yeah, for me, the length of the project, progress is an issue. But I think, as we've both alluded to, it's kind of some of the reason for the project. Like if you're building stuff you want to, or if there's a personal piece for that, or if you have a deadline, there's all pretty good reasons. There's a couple of things that come up in the chat which I think are useful, actually, just below Julian's comment. So thank you, Julian, for that. So Graham McRobert, I keep thinking that is Micro Robot every time I see it, just because it's a small C and then the Robert. And I appreciate small C and large C. I think it's the film A River Runs Through It, where they're talking about Highland Scots and Lowland Scots when he spells it a different name. But so I appreciate it, but apologies if I ever say it Micro Robot. Just an errant part of my brain that wants to do it. But he makes a very valid point. He doesn't time himself when building. And I think that's true of all of us, unless, we, us three here, are slightly anomalous, I'll say, with the greatest of respect, gentlemen.
Yeah. We're on the tail of the bell curve here. We really are.
Yeah, because
you can stay weird if you like. That's fine.
I would never, Joe. I would never. Not to your face, anyway.
Yeah.
I would. If so, that was a joke. I would never say something behind somebody's back. If I have a problem with them, I will call it first. And also in the UK, for those of you, if there are any Americans in the chat, I know that there were a couple who mentioned it. Insulting your friends is one of our great pastimes in the UK. It's kind of a rite of passage. If you know somebody well enough to insult them really well, then that's a good friendship.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, outside of, yes, the 24-hour build challenges and like the 1-hour challenge and stuff like that, I don't think we time ourselves necessarily, outside of those, building a weekend kit in a weekend, those kind of, I use the horrible inverted things challenges. But you get a general idea, right? You kind of roughly know when you started it, even if your memory fails you and you're out by a couple of months, you kind of know. I know that Burger Panther, I built it really rapidly. So I know, even though it's been a couple of weeks, it's not one that's been sitting around for ages, and I haven't timed that. But Brian also makes the point of, my problem isn't how long a project is, it's at what point do I call it finished, which is another fair point, I think, for a lot of people. I think definitely. This, well, from a personal point of view, I don't know about you guys, I think this is more for AFVs for me, because you can keep coming back and tinkering with the weathering on AFVs a lot. For aircraft, for me, like you guys have said, I kind of know what I want it to look like at the end. So I'll know if it's a heavily distressed one, which is typically going to be like Sully scale models. There's a lot of the really heavily weathered stuff. And a lot of that is taken from reference photos, so he knows what point he wants to get to. Tanks, especially ones that you don't have a direct, photo representation that you're doing. You're just doing a Panzer IV in, somewhere in Normandy in 1944. You can kind of let your imagination go. That's one of the great parts of it, right? So at what point do you kind of like, I'll throw a bit more mud on, or I'll do some more streaking, or I don't like that so much, so I'll tone it down, or, you can keep coming back to that. But it is a fair point. At what point do you call it finished? And then you could always put it in a diorama. So is that revitalizing the project, or is it the same project? I'm not sure.
Ooh, yeah.
Mark Stott, little round of applause. After 4.5 months, the Hong Kong model's 148 Lancaster is finished. Congratulations, sir.
Amazing.
I will unfortunately never see those photos because I refuse to go into the cesspool of Reddit. But if you can post them up elsewhere, I'll gladly take a look at it. But
come off the fence there, Alex. Let us know what you really think, mate.
Reddit it's like the haven of the keyboard warrior. Reddit is more so than Facebook, and Facebook's pretty bad.
Can be.
Well, I don't do Twitter. I never have done. I don't want to. I don't need to. Nah.
Yeah, there are some places that are, it's like that lane that you knew on the way home from school. If you went down a certain lane, you were likely to get beaten up. Because certain kids hung out there, or the place where all the kids used to go to smoke, or there's just some places that to avoid.
Yeah.
There's another point here, again from Julian, kind of a follow-up to the other one. If you just, I like the just in compass, make a model, then you could do short, but if you do dioramas or research the project, it could be longer term. That's another point, I guess, which kind of relates to some of those others. At what point do you consider you've started a modeling project? So is it when you buy the kit and start doing your research? Is it when you first cut plastic? What do you got? I mean, I guess it's different if you're doing sequential models than if you're doing multiple, right?
Yeah, I do. For me, when I start a model, it's literally box open, cellophane off, and I'm either spraying the first bit on the sprue or clipping the first bit off the sprue. For me, that's when the clock starts. I don't count the research beforehand because, to be honest, I'm always doing research anyway.
Yeah.
And I might see a particular inspiring photograph of, something, and that'll inspire me to go and get the project, go and get the kit. But being out here, it might be 4 months before I, get a hold of the kit. By which time there's something else come in because, I suffer from squirrel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think most modelers do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, when I came out here, I said, right, I'm not going to have a stash out here as well as my stash at home. And I'll just bring out a couple of things that I'm going to do in that period. And I've now got a year's worth of models here. And I thought, oh, crikey, it started. I knew it would. And I knew it would. And I said to myself, it's not going to happen. But so I'm always doing research anyway. So for me, it's literally when I start the project, that's the firing gun going off.
Yeah. What about you, Gary? Is it the same?
For me, it's when I first press record on the camcorder. Basically, it's really It's very sad in a lot of ways. It's reducing it to its absolute bare minimum. But it's for me, a project starts when I've got a camera in front of it, I press record, and I start doing something, whether it be cutting stuff or assembling stuff, or whatever. It's when I've got something on a camera that I then have to go and download and edit together. So literally, as soon as the record button goes, then I've started that kit. Yeah. So I've got an awful lot of kits I've started, an awful lot that I've begun and done bits of, and then they've sort of, no one knows about it because I haven't done the video yet, so they don't know that I've actually started shooting that or started recording or whatever.
Yeah, nobody knows about my Dropbox folders of shame either. So
yeah.
But I did recently have to clear a load of storage out of it because of that. So storage. So if anybody out there is thinking of ever getting a YouTube channel going, I would highly recommend that you buy some sort of large storage device. So, for example, in this PC that I'm using at the moment, which was my main PC, there we go. I've got an 8 terabyte hard drive partitioned into 4 drives. And the one downstairs doesn't have that, and it really needs it. So I use a lot of cloud storage. I've got a Dropbox, which is now absolutely almost full. The amount of footage that and I delete footage as well. So this isn't. I know some people keep all their raw footage, but it's terabytes of data. So data storage, and I don't shoot in 4K. So when 4K becomes the standard, you have to quadruple that storage. So yeah, but for me, it's very similar to you both. When I start a project is when I either press record or start cutting plastic, and usually they're the same thing, right? For me, research, I think like you, Jamie, I'll see an inspiring picture or something which often inspires me to do the project. But that's not really the research that I'm then doing, and I'm doing through the build. So if I start that, I'll then, get the pictures up like, right, okay, specifically what color was the interior of this particular aircraft? Say I was doing flak bait, I'd try and find all the pictures of that, or contemporary B-26s to look at, do they have pictures of that one's interior? Because although there were standards in World War II, as we all know, they weren't always adhered to. In the US, it was primarily because of production differences, because the factories kicking out like B-24s faster you could speak. So obviously they had distributed production, big different companies and stuff. For the UK and for Germany, it was often a question of supply, depending on when in the war you're looking at. We were supposed to paint it in this, but we've only got, half of this particular color to mix in. So it's like, well, just put half in then, so you get a different shade. So there's all that kind of thing going on. So if I'm doing specific aircraft, I will try and do that, but I'll do that along the way. I don't have a block of research first, which I'm counting as the project time. Those are rabbit holes to get lost down during the project, and they probably do add to the project time. Because you know what the internet's like. It's just like, oh yeah, I'll look at B-26 interiors, and then suddenly I'm looking at stealth characteristics of like late 80s aircraft. I'm thinking, why am I here? Or how a particular missile seeker head works. I'm just like, I don't know. How is this related to a B-26 again? Okay, just looking down. Give me a second, because I saw a couple of ones. Here we go. Julian, we should make you a mod and get you to take all of the questions, because it's much easier than to have one person that you're looking for. And again, we're kind of talking about this as we go. So are we talking total length of are you talking length of a project in total time, such as 3 months, or number of hours, such as 3 months of 10-hour weekends, so 120 hours? I think, broadly speaking, we're all talking about total time, right? From when we start to when we hit the final upload button on YouTube, or deliver our commission or whatever it is. Now, sometimes that's related, I think. So the B26, for instance, has had 26 hours of work on it. 24 of those, obviously, in that 24-hour challenge. Not all of that was actually work time. So probably it was fairly inefficient. I would say 2/3, because I'm currently editing a video of like that 26 hours in 26 minutes. So that it's a single watchable video. And I spent a lot of time talking to people, answering questions, getting down rabbit holes. So it was probably about 1/3 of that time was actually build time, maybe half. Let's be generous. So if you weren't live streaming it, then probably you could do it in 24 hours. Live streaming is a very different experience. If any of you doubt that, I would encourage you to try. It's not an ideal model making experience by any means.
No.
But yeah, we are talking about total time, right? Or do you guys log the hours you spend on kits, or?
No, I was asked by a viewer relatively recently how long a particular project took, and I said I was in hours at the bench. I was like, I had no idea, absolutely no idea. I could have a bit of a guess. It took me 3 weeks or whatever it was, and then tottering at how much time I probably sat at the bench. Bit of an educated guess, but there used to be was it Fine Scale Modeler back in the day used to put that, it took this many hours, and their contributors would have to log it, kind of thing. And I've never done that. I wouldn't have a Scooby-Doo.
No.
So I'm like, oh yeah, it took me 2 weeks, took me 4 weeks, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, the only way I could work it out really was by going to footage, because again, to make a 20 to 30 minute video on a model kit, again, you are cutting out, for me, it's over 90% of the footage that I actually take, I would say. So what you guys, and I put a lot sometimes of speeded up footage in if I want to show kind of like the whole masking process. I'm not going to make you sit through the amount of time that it took me to. So at 6 times speed, then you can see it, and it's still watchable, at that, and it will take 30 seconds or whatever. So yeah, I mean, could go back and tot it all up, but I would, unless you were charging by the hour for commission, which I say nobody would ever do. Well, nobody's sane. So if you are that person that would like to do that, please contact me. I've got plenty of commission working for you. I'd even charge a reasonable hourly rate, even at minimum wage. Doing it, by the hour would be fairly profitable.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, we are, Julian and everybody else, we are talking about from when we crack that plastic to when we say done, rather than
I don't record everything.
No.
So I'll think this will be useful. Click, go.
Yeah.
And again, I'm editing it right down as well. I don't think I'd ever put out a build video if I videoed pretty much everything that I did and I had to edit something from that. And then because the way I structure things is I'll do just a talky thing to the camera as episode 1, introducing the project. Then I'll do the cockpit the next episode, construction, painting and finishing. And if it's a more involved project like the F14, I might split that down. So, it'd be 4 or 5 episodes. So it would take me a month per project really to put it out, which is nice for me because then that de-stresses I'm behind. I've got to get something out. But I haven't put a build up for 3 or 4 weeks now because I've had 2 weeks off and I'm just getting back to the bench. So I'm lucky in that the way I approach YouTube is I'll just do it when I want to do it.
Yeah.
So I'm certainly not like, Gary who has to put that content out because it's his job. So he needs to keep the momentum going. And if you've got Patreons, you need to provide them some exclusive content. And for me, for me, YouTube is another part of my hobby, and it has to be fun. Yeah. And I think if I went down that route, it would be more like a job than fun. And that would be unsustainable. Yeah.
I think actually it would be useful, well, maybe not useful, but interesting, to like have a fairly large group of modeling YouTubers describe their creation process, because I think there are as many different ways of approaching a YouTube channel for scale modeling as there are different types of scale modeling, I think, because I tend to video everything in build, principally because I don't want to be worrying about, because I've learned from experience, because I have had instances where I've got to edit and I'm just like, how do I show X thing? And I realize I've not videoed that, and it's just like, I can't go back and unpick the pieces to show building that. So it's just like, so now I tend to build everything on camera, and then I've got it if I need it. It's that kind of thing. Now, 99% of the time I don't need it, but it's easy to delete. So that does limit me, because it means that if I have a half hour, an hour or something where I just think, oh, I could just get that done, if I haven't got my setup set up, I can't do that, unless it's something I specifically make that decision of, like, I'm not going to film that piece, and that's okay. So it brings with it its own restrictions. But yeah, I think it's really interesting to look at the differences, and how we've all developed different styles and different approaches. I think that's good, because it keeps it fresh for people, because God, if we were all the same, how boring would it be? Question from Steve. Would a long project be any way beneficial to the newish modeler than a short one? I'm guessing the answer is no, but you never know. What do you guys think?
Well, I suppose
again, it depends. Sorry, terrible answer. Again,
yeah, if a new modeler really wants to do a 1/48 scale Lancaster, and he's enthused, or say they are enthused, and they want to do it, and they're going to learn an awful lot from the process. There's nothing to say that a newish modeler couldn't do that. If that's what they want to build, then go ahead and build it and enjoy the process, and you'll probably learn more in that one project than you would in a smaller short project. So yeah, go for it. And if it ends up on the shelf of doom, then go back to something more simple, and then once you've got a little bit more experience, go back to it. That's what I'd say.
Definitely.
Yeah. Anything to add to that, Gary?
No, I would just to echo what Jamie's saying there. Is like, it's very easy to think, right, okay, I'm going to start making models. I've made my starter set Spitfire, therefore I can take on a B-26 or a Liberator or something like that, and you can get disheartened very quickly if you haven't had the practice of doing things. But if you take things slowly and stick to some basic rules, like always dry fitting things, and hey, watch a load of videos as well, and see where other people have made mistakes, perhaps. But just take it slowly. Don't rush it. I think that the problem comes when people take on an ambitious project but want to have it done tomorrow. If you just take your time, watch what other people, pick up tips about things, the slightest things. sticking canopies on with PVA instead of trying to use polystyrene cement and things like that. So all the things that we know are going to mess up your kit if you do them. We've all made those mistakes, and there's loads and loads of videos out there about people who've made the mistakes who say, do you know what I learned? Don't do that, do this. And if you're prepared to spend the time, and it's a hobby after all, it's, fairly unlikely that newish modelers are under that much of a time pressure to get things done. Relax and enjoy the damn thing. Enjoy the intricacy of it, because if you do it right, the buzz you get at the end of finishing a kit, even I do now. If I finish a kit, I've made what, I don't know, 200 in the last 3 years kits. Now, if I finish that B26 the way I want it to be done, if the paint job's how I want it to done, if the figures with it are the way I want to do it, I am going to be absolutely buzzing with it. And I'll be down my club showing it off and saying, yes, I did that. And that, I'd love that. I love that feeling. And it can be from a simple model, or it can be something complex. But if you want to spend the time, absolutely go for it. But just take the time, have the patience, because good things come out of patience, I reckon, in this hobby.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
now sorry, Alex. I was just going to say, luckily now with a modern kit, even a big, complicated modern kit is going to be so much easier to put together than a big, complicated kit was 10 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would echo both of your comments. I think long projects can be really beneficial if you approach them the right way. As you both said, you can't just take on a big project and think, okay, this is going to be done in 3 weeks or 6 weeks or something. If you, and again, it depends what you want out of it. What are you trying to do with a long-term project? What do you call that? Is it just something that's big? Is it complex? Is it a diorama? Because that you can set up, okay, I want a diorama and I want, say, 3 vehicles in it and some figures, and I want like a building, and this is the story I want to tell, basically. And you kind of sketch it out. Even if you're terrible at drawing, nobody's ever going to see those drawings. You stick figures or whatever, get your composition. That can be a long-term project, right? Because you've got to make the individual models there. And that is, as Gary said, that's chunking it down, which is a phrase that is used in corporate sort of world a lot. It's horrible. I hate the phrase, but it is breaking it down into pieces, that are manageable. You don't come at a meal and get your steak and just put it in your mouth, because it would choke you. You cut it up into pieces that you can manage. And those are going to be different for different people, right? If you've got a big mouth like me, you can put a big piece in. If you've got a small mouth like somebody else, then you can't. You'd have to cut that into 2 or 3 pieces. So and again, I could fit a large piece in my mouth, but do I want to? Is that going to be pleasurable? To Gary's point, it's like, probably not. So I'd want to cut it into small pieces and savor those. You will learn stuff along the way. As a new modeler, it doesn't matter how many YouTube videos you watch. And watching YouTube videos is a great way to kind of kickstart stuff and get ideas and techniques. You've still got to do those techniques, right? I watch plenty of volumetric painting videos. And a lot of them will talk, I've mentioned about Marco Frazzoni and Ninjon and Squidmar and all these people. They all talk about the techniques and stuff, and they make it look easy because they've got the practice. They all talk about working on their brush technique, and they've been doing it for years. So I am not going to watch these videos and then be able to paint a miniature like Marco Frazzoni. God, I wish. It's going to take time because I've got to practice. I've got to get my hand-eye coordination in. I've got to keep going at that. If you watch something like Ninjon, you'll see he does make mistakes, and then you'll see he corrects them, and you keep those on the videos because that's part of the hobby. We learn from our mistakes. We're very negative experience driven as humans. But a long-term project will teach you slightly different things than making an individual model. Or a kind of, let's say, 2 or 3 month build, a standard build, let's say. Because if you're allocating more time to it and taking things in slightly let's say, longer order. Maybe you have time to try out techniques that you wouldn't before, or you're going to add seat belts this way that you've made yourself and things, which all takes time. And if you're just doing a standard build out of the box, then you might not do that. The danger of it, I think, as people have also mentioned, if you back it too much and it becomes this unmanageable mess, and you just feel it's this great weight of this thing that looks at you every time you go in the room as a sort of shameful thing. It's a lot about attitude, right? Because if you feel like that about it, as the homework you haven't done, then it feels like that, right? It feels like the homework you haven't done. Whereas if it's like you're adding, to this, and it's still, even if you've got a long-term project, there's no shame in giving yourself a deadline. Say, I want to build this in a year. Yeah, set yourself that, and again, break it down into little pieces. And it's okay to adjust that, but it's at least you've got that realistic end date. You're working towards something rather than it just being this sort of vague thing. But unfortunately, I'm going to use a horrible phrase here. It's project management, which is something I'm really sorry to have brought in, but you kind of do have to have that. Right.
I thought I'd never hear stuff like that ever again.
But really, what project management is just it means making things manageable for you, so that it doesn't just become this horrible, macabre thing that's waiting there, looking at you, with making you feel guilty every time you look at it, and that you feel that you will actually get filled before finished before you die.
Yeah, that's always good.
Might not happen, but as long as you're happy with all the steps along the way and you're enjoying making the models and doing all of that, you may find you come to it and you bring it all together and you think, what, that first tank I did isn't quite up to the standard of the others. I'm going to go back and revisit that and do some extra weathering or whatever. And again, it's all fine. It's your project. As I said before, there are no dead ends in modeling. Graham McRobert, the temptation to say Michael Robert is so strong. Can I get a 1/35th Chinook in plus Special Forces figures? I can definitely get a Chinook. Depends what version. I know because I sold one to a regular in the shop very recently. He was doing it in the winter camouflage, the white and sort of bluish grey that's used or was used. Special Forces figure. Again, not sure. Contact me on the shop email address. Tell me exactly what you're looking for, and that is certainly possible. Just looking down, I noticed a little further down. There's a comment here. As we speak, I'm building a 1/72nd F4B4. F4B4. So that's, which version of the Phantom is that?
Or is it the US Navy biplane, pre-war biplane?
23 parts, and I'm building it. Yeah, let us know which that is, because I'm not exactly sure. Building it for the IPMS show in September. And again, that's giving yourself a couple of months. Good deadline to have. Jarek, welcome. You are free. Please feel free to pop in and join the conversation. John, if you have the link, I believe. So just I think. Oh, question from Craig. Is length of time it takes to complete a project ultimately relevant unless you're charging by the hour? It's not a race or competition. It's a very good point, Craig. I don't think we're necessarily saying it's particularly important. And I think, as we said right at the beginning, the kind of what is the ideal project length? It depends. It depends on you. It depends on what you're trying to achieve. It depends on what you enjoy. I think all of us have a kind of rough idea of, if somebody says, "Oh, I'm doing this," you kind of get a rough time frame in your mind, I think, and it's probably dependent on your own biases, right? So I'm probably going to think it's a couple of months, 2 or 3 months. Gary might think it's a bit shorter. Jamie might think it's a little bit longer. But we're probably not thinking it's going to be 2 or 3 years. I think that's or like if you say that and then you turn up with it tomorrow, I'd be pretty surprised because like, oh, right. Okay. I didn't realize you were building it like overnight. So I'm a member of a Discord group that has a bunch of YouTube modelers in. I'm always surprised to see like how quickly some people complete stuff at a rate that I couldn't to that standard, if you like. Now, are they doing serial production or parallel production? I'm very much a parallel person. So does it matter? No, it doesn't matter that somebody is, doing something faster than you or slower than you. It's really what's relevant for you, unless somebody else is relying on it, like a commission.
Well, I think deadlines can be. I mean, we can all have all sorts of deadlines. For me, I'd like to get a project finished because I need to take it home when I fly home.
Yeah.
And I started this Armour Sea Hurricane 4 days before I was due to fly home.
Wow.
And I thought, can I get it done? And I did get it done. And then I decided not to bring it home because I wanted to. The only way to get it home was to take a suitcase, put it in the hold, and I didn't want to do that. I just wanted to go hand luggage. So, yeah, smashed it out in 4 days. Now, one particular technique that I do anyway, not because I've got deadlines coming up, is I use super glue for fuselage halves. Primarily because there's no way I'm going to get any shrinkage at all.
I'm just looking to how to remove you from the stream, Jamie. As a heretic.
Yeah. But using the black super glue with the accelerator means literally seconds later you can be sanding the seam, rescribing, re-riveting, and you're not going to get any shrinkage whatsoever on the seam. And I do that for that. The added side benefit is it's quick.
Yeah,
but it's not why I do it. So there are little things that you can try out if you feel the need for speed, to quote a certain film star. That can have added benefits.
Not affiliated, by the way.
Oh no.
Yeah.
So somebody commented on the video that I did on outlaw paints.
Mm-hmm.
So outlaw paints, and other lacquer paints, but especially outlaw, because they're very pigment dense. So they dry very quickly, as all lacquer paints do. But for instance, I'll say all lacquer paints apart from Tamiya, because Tamiya paints, they have variable consistency, which is, I think, is one problem with any paint line. If they have variable consistency, it's difficult to use them consistently, surprisingly. Whereas these paints are pretty consistent across the entire line. So if you've used a white, you'll know how a yellow will work, or a red, or a green, or whatever. Now, obviously, being very pigment dense, they're not great if you want to do pre-shading. So you'll appreciate that, Jamie. But they dry in seconds. I put on my video, I showed, I waited, I think 3 minutes, which was how long it took me to clean my airbrush to mask on top of this after spraying it on bare plastic, and it doesn't lift. So if you want to be fast about a project, then using something like lacquer paints like Outlaw, SMS, MRP, whatever, can really accelerate that. Now, that doesn't mean, and I think a couple of comments on the video about, I don't want to, rush through my model. It's like, well, that's not the point. The point is that you're not waiting for 24 hours for your Tamiya paints to fully cure, so you don't get lift off when you mask them. So if you want to get through a particular piece of your project onto the next piece, you don't have to have that enforced waiting time. It, on the flip side, doesn't mean that you have to do it in 3 minutes. You can leave it overnight. You could leave it for an hour. You can go and have your dinner. You could do whatever. But the option is there that doesn't exist if you were, say, spraying enamels or spraying a lot of water soluble acrylics to be able to do that. So there are definitely techniques that allow you to, Tamiya extra thin. So if you're going to glue a fuselage together and you're going to use something like this, like Contactor, Contactor provides a really nice strong bond because it contains the usual solvents with a little bit of styrene, so it takes a long time to dry. So you get a long bonding time. So you get quite a deep bond with something like this. Something like Tamiya is pure solvent, evaporates quickly. It's not quite a flash bond, but it's a much faster bond if you're just using capillary reaction and not drowning the part than this. So that is faster. Super glue is even faster still. So, there are techniques. It all depends on what you want to do. I probably wouldn't glue. I mean, for instance, that B17, I didn't glue with Tamiya extra thin. There are ways that you can get really good bond with Tamiya extra thin on a really big model like that. But actually, it almost takes longer doing that because you kind of have to go around and do it all and make sure it's blah, blah, blah. So I used this and, whacked it together and clamped it and left it overnight, because it wasn't an issue. So I could have used super glue. There are lots of different ways to approach the hobby to achieve what you want. And just because you can do something fast, that it enables you to do that step fast, could just mean that it allows you to get to the next piece that you want to spend the time on faster. You just want to, slap some olive drab on a part. An interior you're not going to see much, and it was olive green. Use some outlaw paint. You're not being held up for 24 hours. If you're doing it with enamels. So.
Yeah, because I'm quite impatient.
I mean, I love outlaw paints for their speed, because especially on things like 24-hour build was really useful. But just being able to mask off. Just let me get this. So I masked off all the anti-glare panels, and then sprayed them, and it literally took seconds, and then it was dry, and then I could move on to the next piece, which was great because the anti-glare panels, most of the work is in masking them for a start, and they're not terribly difficult things to mask because there was no props on it or anything. It's if I spent loads of time on it, or if I'd used enamel paints or acrylics, it would have just been longer. It wouldn't have added anything to the build. So yeah, I'm fairly impatient when I want something. Other times, when it doesn't matter, yeah, it's fine. I can do something else. But especially later in a build, when you don't have that, if you're doing early in the build, you can do sub-assemblies, and if you paint something, it doesn't matter if it's going to be, a couple of hours before you get back to it, because you've got hours of stuff still left to do. Just going back to the chat. Again, if you have something you want to say, just remember to put question, or if you've got a comment, put it in capital letters if you can. Just helps draw attention to it if I'm scrolling through, because I'm always behind the chat as well. So apologize. G&A scale model apprentice. Only an apprentice? At least you're not an acolyte. That's my one and only terrible Star Wars reference. It's not really Star Wars anymore, though, is it? It's crap. Anyway, it's the pre-war US Navy biplane. Okay. US Army. See, I hear F4 and I automatically think Phantom. So it's that terrible US practice of like reusing designations between services and stuff. It's just like, why You've specifically got designations, you know, all this stuff to make it easy, and then you're reusing them. Come on, guys.
And the Corsair as well. F4U
Yep.
Corsair.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, see, if it was F4U, I'd automatically thought Corsair. Yeah, you're right.
F4F Wildcat. They like their F4s, don't they?
Yeah, just call everything F4.
Yeah.
But then the Wildcat, yeah. Not a fan. Those stubby little radial engine fighters that the US did. Yeah. It's just as a complete aside. I used to work for a company, and I've mentioned the company before, or rather, I've mentioned the head of it. It was a private company. It was owned by a guy who had invented electrochemical detection in HPLC. A guy called Professor Peter Kissinger. No relation to Henry, I don't believe, anyway. And I remember having a conversation with him because he liked World War II history as well as stuff. He'd been in Vietnam, and we had some chats from time to time. Pretty personable guy. But he was talking about how he hated Japanese, like the inline engine fighters. You know, he said, you know, give me a big old radial engine every day. And I just thought, that's funny because I kind of think the opposite. Like radial engine stuff to me is kind of uglier than the kind of sleek lines of the Spitfire, the Hurricane, you know, like the KI-61 Tony, you know, all of those things, rather than an F4 Wildcat. It's like, yeah, if the US was going to win the war on looks, I think it might have come in second.
Well, yes, we had the very pretty Spitfire, but then we also had the Typhoon with that massive Jimmy Hill chin underneath, completely ruining the lines of the aeroplane.
But it's
look at the Tempest 2 compared to the Tempest 5. There's no
comparison. True, but then I kind of think of the Tempest and Typhoon as like the Cray twins. It's just like, you know, you wouldn't mess with them. They're kind of big and brutish, you know. It's just like, yeah, I'll leave them alone.
Yeah.
We get some strange analogies on this show. Ivan says, question, if you're doing your very first commission, what is the best way of pricing the job up? Oh, that's an interesting one. Go on, Jamie, you take that one first.
Yeah. So if it's a model you don't particularly want to do, set a price so high that if they agree, then it's worth doing, because they're paying over the odds. Or the sort of rule of thumb is what would I be happy paying for it? You know, would I be happy paying £150 for you know a World War II fighter, or would I be happy paying £500 for a World War II fighter? You know, what would you be happy to, you know, if it was your money, what would you be happy? I know some people who do commissions do, well, the price of the base kit and the aftermarket bits, and then they'll put a factor on it. So factor of 2, factor of 3, factor of 4, multiples of that. So, you know, there's no easy answer. Or, you know, go on eBay, Google pro-built, which is a phrase that really pulls my pubes, but you'll get all the, if I'm allowed to say that on YouTube, sorry, Alex, I don't want to get your demonetized. Have a look on eBay and see what a similar, you know, see what the competition's, you know, putting it out at, and then maybe pitch it around there as a starter for 10.
Yeah, I mean, my 2 cents, don't charge 2 cents. It kind of depends what it is, who it's for, and what level you're at, right? So, for instance, I did the 1/48 scale monogram B-17 for a very, very low price. It was for a museum, it was for a commemoration, but I'm sure the museum didn't feel that it was a low price. Now, it was a low price for what I would normally charge, but for them, it was still a three-figure sum. So, and I did a very basic job on it, a job that I, would stand by, but you got to think of what is the customer expecting. I've got models in my shop, so a lot of my builds end up at the shop, which is great because I've got somewhere to put them. My girlfriend is happy because they're not in the house. But customers can see, if you're going to get a commission, this is kind of what standard is, or what's possible. You might not want to pay for that. If you're going to pay, if I'm going to do a 124 scale airfix Spitfire with all of the bits open and stuff as I did, that's going to be a different price than building an out-of-box, closed cockpit F-35, for instance, 1/72 scale. So I think as long as you're honest and open with your customer, so, if it's a friend, you might charge much less than you might charge somebody else, but you might just do, put it together, do the seams and spray it kind of thing. If they're expecting that, that's great. If they're expecting some sort of, as Jamie said, pro-built, thinking they're going to get something that looks like it's been made by Plasmo for 30 quid, the best thing to do is let them down gently and say, no, don't do that. But it's as Jamie said, both sides have to be happy with the number, right? So, and you have to be happy. If there was something, if somebody came to me and said, I want you to build I don't know, like the old Airfix Bentley blower. Yeah. And I needed it doing by, in 2 weeks' time. And I got £500 to spend. I'd be like, well, I'll see if I can find somebody for you, because I know the kind of work that's involved in that kit. 2 weeks' time. And say they wanted a certain standard, they showed me some pictures and stuff. And I'd just be like, well, £500 probably wouldn't cover that. How many hours are you going to have to spend that you're not doing something else, either your hobby time, work, if you take a day off because you need to finish it, for instance, that cuts into your profit margin pretty heavily if you have to do that sort of thing. And if you've agreed something, you kind of have to do it. So it's a really complex thing. And I would say, yeah, you can, like Jamie said, add all the bits together and say, if you're supplying all of those bits, it's 3 times that price. That's what I would charge as part of that. If you want me to supply it, then it'll be 4 times because I've got to buy the thing. And this will be the start date and this will be the end date kind of thing, or roughly. And if they balk at that, or if they look, really happy, you work it between you, At least you got to have a starting point, I would say, and have a discussion. Ask them. I would always say in any job, doesn't matter what you're doing, not necessarily modeling, but ask them, what are their expectations? How much money do they have? What time scale? Ask all the sorts of questions you would ask in a work, environment. Because if you know those things, then you can see if it's something you want to do, even, and if you're going to price it, for what you both think is fair. It's a good question. If you find an answer, please let me know, because I'd love to have a reliable formula.
Yeah, because you don't want to sell yourself short, but then you don't want to outprice yourself and lose the job. So it's difficult.
Yeah. I mean, I would say most people, and I'm again, the Gaussian distribution, bell-shaped curve, but I think most people underestimate what it would cost for a commission model on the customer side. They think, oh, for 100 quid, I can get, again, the Plasmo level, whatever, Marauder or something. It's just, I mean, no. Not in a time scale that they would want to, yeah, that might be a 3-year project. Yeah, say 3 years I could do that. Yeah, fine. And you pay me now because that £100 would be worth more in 3 years when I can actually deliver it. But yeah, it's and I would say most modelers that haven't done commissions before will undersell their work, because you think, I can't really charge 60 quid for that, can I? Because I'm just making models. And it's like, but you're not. You're selling it. It's a bit like I heard once a certain type of lady explain that she's selling her time, not the services contained therein. It wasn't a discussion about that. It was peripheral to it. I wasn't touting, but
and that's the case of the defence, Your Honour.
Yes. Just trying to go through the chat, make sure I've got everything.
Well, I take a very, very simple approach to that. I just don't do commissions. I haven't got time. Just don't do them.
Yeah, I mean, that is so I'd say the first thing you need to decide, because if you ask them, okay, well, what is it? Because then you have an idea. Okay, so if it's an airfix F-35 starter kit, right? That's a very different proposition than a 148 scale B-17 by Hong Kong Models. Right? So it's like, right, okay, if you know what it is that they want, okay, what do you want it to look like? Do you just want me to build it and paint it, as I have here, and then show them an example of, a basic build? Or do you want, the interior cockpit, the cockpit open, blah, 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 blah. And then you have at least an idea of what they're expecting, and then ask them how much they're prepared to pay for it. Some people will come back and say, well, I don't know what it is. How much is it? But it gets that conversation going, because then you can say, well, it depends on blah, 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 blah. I would, for a basic one, I'd probably charge whatever the amount is. But if you wanted more, I could do this and this and this. It's going to take longer, and it starts that conversation. But you need the conversation. You can't just put a price, Well, you can, but therein lies a lot of problems ahead for you. My girlfriend's a solicitor, so everything should be written down. Sorry, I just had a question there from Stian. Do anyone else of you drift away on the ongoing project and start designing and 3D print extra detail parts? I'll start on this one. I think it's very easy if you are like a lot of us modelers, as Jamie said, oh, squirrel, to, whilst you're doing the research on something, and I'll give you an example. The F-15, we got an F-15 buddy build, right? I used the Tamiya F-15C, and I decided you couldn't use the decals that were included in the kit, decal scheme. So I thought I'll do a 65th Group Aggressor Squadron. They do some really cool, like 3-color Russian-esque or Soviet-esque camouflage jobs. That'll be cool. And in the research for that, I happened to notice that the nozzles on the old Tamiya kit, because it is an old kit, it's like 77 or something, really stands up well for the time. But the nozzles are pretty ropey, and they have the what do you call them? The feathers, the bits the turkey feathers that cover most of the workings of it. Whereas actually the F-15s that are in service don't have those, and nozzles are quite detailed. They're quite complex structures. So I did exactly that. I ended up 3D printing, an extra set for that. Now that's fine if it's just one, right? But there is that temptation of going down the rabbit hole and just like, oh, well, that's not quite there. I'll just add this and add that. And then your project snowballs. So I think the answer to your question is absolutely people do that. I guess it comes back to that question of what do you want from your project? Is that okay that it snowballs into that? Do you enjoy that? Or is it just going to get to a point where, you know, it becomes so big and unwieldy and you've got so many 3D printed bits that you don't know what to do? What about you, Jamie? Gary, do you ever get down this kind of like, oh, well, I could just ...
No,
I
not really.
No.
I haven't got a 3D printer. I wouldn't know where to start on that specific one. But, you know, today I was whittling away on my this is going to be a mouthful, HA112K1L Tripala conversion, Spanish 109, different engine on it. And I was getting a bit bogged down, so I stopped and I designed all the masks for the markings. So it was a nice break from whittling away.
Yeah,
it's my own fault. I needed a break because the conversion kit's designed for the Tamiya kit, and I thought, well, I've got a Edward kit in the stash. Can I make it fit? And it doesn't. So I've got bogged down. I'm now wading through treacle on this bloody thing, and I just needed a break from the bench. So yes, is the answer. Not for that specific 3D part, but you know, other things.
Yeah. So you got three different answers there, Stian. No from Gary, yes from Jamie, and it depends from me. So
yeah, I might scratch build a few bits out of plastic. Like I did the road design recently. I built a ramp for it. Had to extend the door at the front because it doesn't reach far enough. It's little things like that. But again, I don't have a 3D printer anyway, and I wouldn't even know how to use a 3D design program. So no, absolutely not.
Well, the beauty of a 3D printer, if you are ever tempted, Gary, got one I don't use. I could send you. Yeah.
Don't have no room at all. When I've built my modelling man cave at the end of the garden, hopefully later this year, then grand. But right at the moment, no. Oh no.
The beauty of resin 3D printers, I mean, there's a lot of disadvantages, right? Resin stinks. A lot of people react quite badly to it, skin-wise and stuff. But if you don't have those, and there are other things like not the plant-based resins, but the water-based, water washable resins, I should say, are a bit better. But they're kind of known, you know, and going back to the headaches in modeling, you know, if you don't want to deal with it, don't do that. Yeah. But there are a lot, you know, I can use very basic 3D printing design programs, but I don't, because the amount of STLs, the amount of files available now are just so, there's so many you can print. I mean, you could print stuff that you could never possibly complete in your lifetime, you know. Having said that, I'm doing off camera, not filmed. I'll probably do some stuff on it on the channel at a later date. Is the I don't know if you guys know a company called Mini Hobby Model.
Nope.
I'm sure you will have seen some of their kits. They are a Chinese. They're like a Chinese Mr. Craft. And they are as good as that sounds. So this is an old trumpeter SU-27. So this is the I think it's a 1999 tooling. So it's one of the old ropey trumpeter toolings that they upgraded upgraded. They put some new parts in and passed it off as an SU35/37, the development one, which had the canards. And then obviously they got rid of the molds to this third-party company, who then impressed it badly and put it in kits. I picked it up at a model show. It was like 10 quid for a 1/48 scale Sukhoi. I thought, yeah, I'll do that. It doesn't matter if it's not terribly good. You know, it's probably the worst kit I've ever put together. Manufactured, you know, within the last 30 years, rather than, you know, an old frog thing that's been passed around forever, which you still can make okay. This thing, the fit, I mean, the parts that they add to the SU27 are literally added onto the leading edge of that front, you know, the very, so they just stick these two bits on. But of course, the front is aerodynamic, and the front of these parts is aerodynamic, but the back isn't. So you get like a wave in the fuselage. So there's a massive part you have to fill if you want it to look anything like aerodynamic. And it's just like, I looked at the nozzles and thought, because it has 3D vectoring nozzles, and it's like, well, nozzles, easy thing to 3D print and add, and that will, you know, make it look at least presentable at the back. Can you find SU27 or SU35 nozzles? Couldn't find an STL for them anywhere. And I thought, this isn't a particularly unknown or uncommon aircraft. You know, the SU27 is an old aircraft now, old 4th gen plane. Nobody's made feathers for it. It's like bizarre, you know. Anyway, there's a comment here. Nick mentioned here. As a 67-year-old modeler, I do revisit one or two really bad models just to remind me how lucky we are nowadays to revisit old skills that we seem to have lost due to the quality of today's models. I'll both agree, well, I respect your opinion, obviously, but I'll both agree and disagree with you here, Nick. I think it's really, I mean, I personally do this as well. So talking about the mini hobby models, not a particularly old model, but ropey as hell. I'm doing the, was it the Frog Firefly that was sent to me, which actually isn't that bad, you know. But I do think sometimes it's nice to go back and challenge yourself and do like a 60s, 70s kit. However, I don't think we've lost those skills today. I think this is a myth, you know, perpetrated by people saying that people can't do models unless they just fit together like to me or whatever. I don't think that's true. I think the difference is, from a personal point of view, do you want to spend your time filling, sanding, scratch building, doing all those pieces when you have a kit that actually provides those pieces probably better than most people can scratch build and do all of that? It's how you want to spend your time. It's the quality of time. So I don't think we've lost those skills. I just think it's people choose not to do that because they want to produce a finished kit rather than, I mean, for me, sanding is one of the, it's not a pleasurable experience. It's something I do because I need to. If they could make a kit which didn't need sanding at all, I'm all in. You know, I've done my time sanding. You know, it is a bit like a prison sentence. You have to just get through it. Allegedly, I've never been to prison, obviously. So, yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you revisit old kits? Or old kits, I should say? No,
in the main. You know, when you've got an Armour Hobby Hurricane, why would you go and build the old Italeri kit? You know, having said that, last year I wanted to challenge myself, and I did the Airfix Classic Beaver. And the challenge I set myself was, can I get a surface finish? Because I knew the canopies, there's no way I could get the canopies looking like a modern kit, although I tried my best. But can I make the airframe look like a modern tooling? Sanded it all off, re-scribed the whole thing, re-riveted the whole thing, and I was pleased with how it turned out. Now, I didn't choose the natural metal option that was on the decal sheet. I chose a camouflage one because, you know, that's going to be easier to hide all the little
things.
mistakes. Yeah. And I rivet all my models, and unless it comes all riveted. And it's probably the worst riveting job I've ever done. Just unbelievable. But I was really pleased in the end with how it turned out. That I had that nice. It's a bit like wearing your pants when you're wearing dark blue underpants. So, you know,
Never done it, Jamie.
Not many people notice, but you get a nice warm feeling inside. That I've done this, you know, that I'd taken this thing, and I was really, you know, pleased with it. But you know, I'm not going to attempt that anytime soon. Again,
what about you, Gary? Sorry, Jimmy.
I was just going to say I'll stick with my, you know, modern stuff. Thank you very much.
Yeah. What about you, Gary? You mentioned the Rotodyne there.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a Rotodyne. I did a bit of research on the Rotodyne. I haven't started the Rotodyne. Part of that is because if I want to make that kit how I want to make it, I know the work I'm going to have to put in to do that. And I don't want to do that. So where do you stand on this?
I've just always wanted to make that kit from when I was a youngster. I never got to make it when I was young, and I remember seeing the molds at Airfix last year or the summer before or something like that, and saying to Dale, mate, you make that again, you'll sell everyone you can press, because I know a lot of people who want that kit. Unbeknownst to me, they were actually being stored there before being shipped off to China, and he hadn't actually got the guys to move them out of the way that day. So there's a whole load of other things like there, like the molds for the SRN4 hovercraft. So I keep thinking, oh, come on, guys, you've got to re-release that as well. But I don't mind making vintage classics. I like it. I mean, I think probably the best viewed video I've made in 2.5 years is the vintage classic of the SM79, the old Spaviero. That's had like over 50,000 views, which to me is an awful lot of views. And I don't know why it did. I wish I knew why, because I'd be a happier and richer person. But for something it just caught on. It just caught the algorithm, whatever. But it was a basic kit. I had fun tarting up the crew figures, you know, scraping them out a bit more and making them a bit more easy to paint well. I didn't do anything fancy to the surface, or I didn't sand it or anything. I just built it and painted it in a nice blotchy scheme, and I really enjoyed it. But it's been it just went crazy. None of the others I've built have done that, sadly, but there we go. I enjoy doing them. I enjoy doing them. I've got like in the middle of building the Matchbox Chinook, because there's a guy who sends me Matchbox kits. It's like it's the Simon's Matchbox Challenge. So he's sent me a load of Matchbox kits. I've made the Hunter T7 was the first one I made, which was a really nice kit to make, and I could do it in the colours of one I flew in when I was like 17 or something at a cadet camp. I made the Swordfish, which is a lovely kit to make. The Chinooks, a little bit more work, but it'd be fun to finish that and then start on the Airfix one, the brand new Airfix one, and see the difference in the two is going to just be unbelievable. But it's not a bad kit. It needs a lot of work to make it look reasonable. I'm never going to make it look good, but because I'm not prepared to invest the time to make it look really, and probably haven't got the skills to rescribe and rivet and do that. That's not something I'm particularly skilled at doing, but I can make it. And I think for that video, it's more a sense of maybe nostalgia for some of the viewers, and also like a look back, just what were they like in those days, if you like.
Yeah, I mean,
So the intent is very different in those. It is to show what those kits were like, and that you can still make something fairly reasonable with modern tools and paints and whatever, but nothing without a lot of effort. Nothing like what you can get out of a box now.
yeah. I mean, so it's all horses for courses, isn't it? That's a phrase you don't hear that often these days. But you know, I actually really like the old Matchbox kits. You know, I grew up on Matchbox kits. Like you say, that they go together really well. I mean, the transparencies were horrific.
Oh,
I
terrible.
mean, in terms of thickness, I mean, it would be like, I mean, thicker than an Apache's armor resistant panels. But to go together, I mean, they were built for, you know, kids to put together and make a decent model of. And I've seen some really nice models made using airfix kits to, you know, to bring them up. But it's as you say, it's like, do you want to invest the time in doing that? As very much Jamie said, when there is an alternative available, and you're not paying pennies for the old Matchbox kits when you can get them. They have that nostalgia value. They have that eBay tax, you know, so they're expensive. So I doubt you will find the well, unless you get it from my shop, because I've got one, the 1/32 scale Spitfire, was it the 19 something? Can't remember. But the old Matchbox kit of that, cheaper than you can buy a 32nd scale Spitfire from Revell, which, you know, okay, it does have a couple of accuracy errors because they used a post-war Spitfire that they scanned, so it's got the wrong blisters on the wings. But you know, those small things aside, you can still use your modeling skills to repair those to you know, where it should be. But that's like 30 quid. You know, you're going to pay more than that for the Matchbox one, and the Revell kit has its issues, but overall it's a better kit. It'll produce a better finished result. 2224. Thank you to Bold to Go. So yeah, and yeah, it's a different mark. I appreciate that, and that's one of the reasons that I do older kits from time to time. So at the moment, you know, people on the chat who watch the live streams will know I'm building the Italieri. It's not really Italieri. It's the old AMT kit of the XB70, the Valkyrie. And actually, when I looked it up on ScaleMates, because I was looking at when it was impressed, and it's like, when I found out it was an AMT, it's like, okay, this makes much more sense. And then because it's like, I quite like the old Italieri kits. I did a lot in the 90s because they had that kind of balance of a mid price point with enough detail and easy enough to put together. They're kind of that sweet spot for me at the time when I didn't have that much money. They offered a good value, yeah. Whereas a Hasegawa kit, yeah, it would be better, crisper, if you could get it, and it'd be twice the price at least, and probably have less detail in the cockpit because Hasegawa don't really do that, and no stores because they sell this separately. So for me at that time, on that budget, they were good value. And even for me as a kind of a bit of a, you know, soft spot for those old kits, looking at the XB70, I was like, this is bad. The fit on this, you know, the kit was fighting me. You know, I had to trim off some of the actual pins because they, you know, when you aligned them, yeah, the pins and the holes went together, but the part was like this, you know, and you think, well, it doesn't, you know, if I trim them off, then yeah, I can get the seams to line. And then when I found out it's an AMT kit, it's like, oh, it makes sense now because you actually go back to the sprues and look at them, and you can kind of see some characteristic AMT tooling things that they do, because you do get to know, you know, kind of how manufacturers tool things. But the good thing is, it's not an AMT kit because AMT seems to use quite a brittle plastic. Italieri plastic's quite soft, so it's just like, it's almost like making an AMT kit slightly easier because it's easier to sand and stuff. But where else can you get an XB70? There's I can't remember, it's a Meng or it's a Chinese manufacturer, Ryfield it might be, do a 11441. She's like 60 quid. And it's just like, okay, it's half the size and it's like twice the price. It's like, I'll go with this and we'll see where we get to. It was a big slab of plastic. We'll see what we can make of it. But I'm doing it in a what if scheme, so I don't have to paint the whole thing white. So, as Jamie said, camouflage hides a great many sins.
Exactly.
So, I think it's being voted on at the moment. I think Southeast Asia scheme is still top, which is great because that really will hide a lot.
Well, I want a 1/72nd scale Hampden in my collection, and
the old airfix kit then.
Well, exactly. I'm going to wait for airfix to do one. Now that might be 1, 2, 5, 10 years, but I'm going to wait for airfix to do one because I don't want to do the old airfix one because I want a really nice model in my collection, and no matter how much effort I put in to that old airfix classic kit, it's not going to look how I want it to look.
Yeah.
And life's too short to do Valen kits as well, so I'm going to wait for airfix to do one, and I've got plenty of other stuff to do in the meantime while I wait. And I know ICM are probably going to be doing it in 48th. I'm going to grab that with both hands. I really am.
Yeah.
So I'll probably end up with a 48th and a 72nd one in my collection.
Yeah, it was one of my the Beyond the Box episode we did with our Nostradamus episode where we predicted toolings for the year. I thought Airfix were going to do a 1/72nd Hampton this year, and they did, but it was the old classic. And I'm just like, that's not what I meant. It's like, it's like the old one. I've got 2 of those, and I did actually start, building them. And so going to Nick's point. So I have some. I don't know where it is, but you can get the plastric strip. I've got some which is I think like 0.5 millimeter, something like that, or millimeter. So I was doing all the stringers for the ribbing and stuff inside. So I did all of that. It's a hell of a lot of work, and of course you've got to carve off all of the pieces from the interior because Airfix at that time had the big like locating lugs, to put your like single slab of plastic in to put your blob seats on. So yeah, I mean the interior just needs completely stripping and rebuilding. You're effectively using the kit as a template almost.
Yeah.
To create your own. And whilst I could go back and finish those, it's just like, and then of course dealing with all the sink marks and all the molding issues and stuff. And these were 80s like toolings of the 80s impressions of the toolings. Well, not more recent, which are likely to be probably a bit worse. You could do with that, or when Valeria said on that interview that they just decided to do the 48th, I'm just like, well, those 1/72nd ones will probably never see the light of day again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I have to watch your interview as well. I didn't realize you'd done an interview until somebody mentioned it in the comments, Gary. So I'll have to watch this after that.
Yeah.
I mean, ICM are, for me this year, Airfix has been my biggest disappointment. Not Revell, because I didn't expect much of Revell, but I expected kind of more of Airfix than they've done. ICM have blown me away with what they've been doing. Yeah,
but Airfix aren't finished yet, though.
I know, but I mean, Jamie, for them to even come to, I would say, the standard that they set in 2022 or 2023, they're not going. I can promise you, they're not going to do it.
Yeah.
Well, I also have some retail knowledge that kind of feeds into that, which people will become aware of later in the year. It's not great. Going on from their recent stock stuff and all the business side, Hornby's not in a great place. So are they going to be investing a lot in a whole load of new tools this year? I'm pretty sure they won't be. Okay. They will have invested in whatever they've probably going to be doing this year already, but it's easy to pull the plug on a project rather than carry on through. If they've got, say they were going to announce 6 new releases, and 3 of them are already tooled, and 3 have to be finished. That's what I'm thinking. So, whereas ICM, just keep saying, "Oh, we'll keep adding stuff." It's just like you've already got one of the biggest release schedules for any of the manufacturers this year. So yeah, I mean, and this Berg Panther, that is the old, I think it's a 2005 tool, the Panther part, which has a couple of fit issues, but nothing like horrific. And then that is the 2024 piece, which is absolutely beautiful to put together. And I'd love to see an entire Panzer IV if they did a chassis to do that. I know there's Panzer IVs all over, but that was a real delight to put together. Having put the Academy one together, which was not a delight, the H. So yeah, complete sidetrack there, but but it kind of goes to the point, doesn't it? That I mean, I built that Berg Panther, and with the Panzer IV turret, it took me 2 days to do the from cutting the plastic to finishing what I could without painting it, and then the rest was just the spaced armor for the turret, attacking that. It's already been painted, and that's because of the precision of the engineering, and that was including the fit issues. There were 2 areas that had fit issues, where the parts just seemed to be too big for the actual holes that they were in, so you need like trimming around the edge. Even with those 2 days, to produce really nice kit that you can really then spend your time on where you want to be. Well, for me anyway, with an AFV, is in the painting and the weathering and all the detail pieces, and making it something, Whereas if I had to do that with, a 1960s toolkit, say, well, the Tamiya Panther, right? It's still a decent kit, but to get it to that standard is not a 2-day job.
No.
So, there is a price point difference for sure. So you can pick up the old Tamiya Panther for peanuts, really, for a 1/35 scale kit. But then you're investing time. And let's face it, for all of us, it doesn't matter how old you are, although when you get older, you tend to value your time more. But it's a precious, finite commodity. I would rather spend an extra 20 or 30 quid on a kit if it's going to save me 20 or 30 hours at the bench. But it's your choice, guys. So, Nick, if you want to do that, that's great. Do it. If you enjoy that, that's what you should be doing. I never really truly get the argument of assemblers versus modelers. I think it's nonsense. I haven't been keeping up with chat for that time. I apologize. Quickly have a quick scan over. Gary, there we go. Steve is, I know he's building this because he bought it for me. And we've been chatting about it. But building the airfix 148 scale Sea Fury right now. Watching Gary Stuff's video on it is really helpful. So
that's good.
I mean, that's part of what we do, right?
Yeah.
Is YouTube is such a great resource for modelers. I mean, I would say, for me, myself included. I mean, I watch. I mean, especially for stuff that I can't get hold of, if I want to. So, for the best modeling company in the world videos, I looked at quite a lot of unboxings of kits that I couldn't get access to, because that I wanted to have a kind of rough assessment of. Just look at the instructions, for instance. Now, without that, yes, there's some on scale mates, but not all. Especially some of the the more obscure ones. And it's so easy, just to, couple 5 minutes, and you've got half a dozen different results. For building, I think the amount of, like watching somebody else build it, or somebody doing specific techniques and things, it's, we had magazines, which, they're nice. It's nice to have magazines, or a physical thing. That's quite a nice, feeling. It doesn't show you how people are doing it in the same way that a video does. It's just, there's only so much you can do in 2D versus a video.
Well, I think ICM have cracked that as well with their building videos that they now provide, because a few times, like making the Cossack MRAP vehicle, there's times, especially in the suspension, you look at the instructions and it's really, where does this little V-shaped thing actually go?
How does it go on that?
Actually go, and from the instructions, it's really not that clear. But now they've got a video based on the CAD, and it revolves the part over and zooms in and goes, okay, there and there, brilliant, thank you very much. That is really an absolute game changer, I think.
I found the because it's an isometric view, and all manufacturers do this, right? Pretty much all use an isometric 3D view. So like a, what do we call it? That kind of a view on instructions, and they're exploded and stuff, which is fine. But any single view of a part hides some perspective of it. And I found it for the bomb sight on this is off at the moment because it was catching on everything. But the bomb sight, how the two pieces of the bomb sight went together were exactly that. It looked like it was going in a different place to when you watch the video. It's just like, and once you watch the video, it's obvious. And it's just that little bit of like, oh, I see. Because before I was like trying to put it on, it's like, this doesn't fit. This doesn't feel like the rest of the kit. And it's like, that's because you're doing it wrong, you idiot. But it just wasn't obvious from the instructions, which are, ICM instructions are up there as some of the best available now. But still, what you can convey in a single image, so much less than you can convey when you actually see the parts and the way they have them coming together and stuff. It's brilliant.
Really good.
Craig says, I must have been reading the wrong magazines. Yes, I think that goes to my comment before about time rather than services, doesn't it? Similar vein there. That was actually, it was a discussion, again, complete aside. I was working as, actually, my uncle, this is a bizarre piece of trivia. My uncle was the comptroller of Belvoir Castle in the UK. And I, as a summer job from university, went and worked at Belvoir Castle as a warden, castle warden. So showing people around, running the shop, doing security, all that kind of stuff. So we worked for the Duke of Rutland, which was a fantastic experience. You get lots of behind the scenes and stuff. But one of the ladies that ran the sweet shop on occasion, she came in and did stuff, was a more mature lady. She's probably in her 50s, I guess, at the time. So to me, it was like, I had no idea how old she was. But I remember having this discussion about prostitutes with her, which she started the conversation. And looking back at it, I think that probably wasn't an appropriate conversation for her to start.
No.
Just some like, old cougar or something. Very prim and proper sounding, But she's probably growing pampas grass in her front garden at the time. You two of a certain age, you got that reference. I believe it's pineapples now. So,
is that right?
Right, okay.
Yeah, I read that in I think it was a YouTube actually about a cruise ship where lots of people had like these upside down pineapples in their doors. It's like, oh, this is nice. This is like a fruit themed thing. It's like, I think you'll find that means something different. Yeah. I think it was like one of those, I was today year old when I learned kind of thing.
Yeah.
Obviously, a different type of cruise ships I've been on as well.
I've not been on a cruise ship. Like, they appeal more to me now. So would you say as waitress at a cocktail bar? No.
Yeah.
Although very much of my time. Well, on that salubrious note, we should probably stop before we say something we shouldn't.
Yeah.
Or say more things we shouldn't, at least.
Yeah, exactly. Again.
Monetizable things.
But yes, in terms of length of modeling projects, as we correctly predicted 2 hours ago, the answer is it depends.
Yeah.
Right? I think the average length that people spend on is probably a couple of months, plus or minus. But it really does depend on what is the subject, what are you trying to achieve, all of those things. What's your budget, because if you want to buy it aftermarket and you're on a limited budget, you might have to pace that over several months. There are so many factors. There is no one correct answer, as there is no ideal answer to what we do in our hobby. There's no correct way to do this. So enjoy models at your pace. As Gary said, the most important thing about this hobby is remembering it's a hobby, remembering that we do it for enjoyment, unless we're doing commissions, which is a separate subject. And just take your time, whether that's a 1 hour challenge, which I don't recommend, up until, spending 3 years making your dream come true. Very much up to you. But thank you, Jamie, for popping in tonight. Thank you, Gary, for joining.
Good to see you as you always.
And for the rest of you, have a great rest of your week. Enjoy it. Stay safe. And we'll see you next time.
Cheers.
Cheers, everyone.
Bye.